Good evening. What's going on there, folks? Welcome back here to a Wednesday night, August 14th, 2024. It's about 10:23 here local time in the PM in California. I'm up here in Northern California, just outside of Chico. Still got some earthquake activity ramping up here in Southern California, just south of me. A couple different swarms that we're watching, obviously around the Bakersfield area, this area around the Puente Hills fault system there, and also a little separate swarm down here outside of the Salton Sea area that's been increasing in intensity here throughout the last 24 hours. Nothing big, but man, the multitude of quakes here ramping up. The biggest one was about, looks like a 3.4, 6 o'clock local time here earlier this morning. And all this activity ramping up, pushing up against the plate boundary here, the San Andreas Fault recently. And we got to watch this, folks. Obviously, a lot of news has been taking place here in terms of the increasing earthquake activity here around California. And, of course, Dr. Lucy Jones there, seismologist, world-renowned seismologist, has been all over the media talking about how we should expect here increasing earthquake activity. That could lead to elevated, larger magnitudes out here. So we've been watching pretty much a region here north of the Garlock Fault shear zone. You can pretty much draw. There's a separate line here as well that goes across this area. Down south here, not a whole lot specifically in this little section of land here. It's a little odd, but this is where a lot of strain is building up right now, specifically in the Garlock Fault shear zone, just north here and down south across Los Angeles, obviously, and further towards the Salton Sea area. So let's start up here in the Bakersfield area where we're still seeing some earthquake activity, and it's been consistent here. We did see a 3.3 earlier today, about 8 miles there below the surface. The complete tally here for earthquake activity now stands at about 622 earthquakes, and this is in the last 30 days, but technically this is since about the 6th of this month, August, so roughly about 8 days ago when that 5.2 struck. So that's a lot of massive amount of earthquake activity following a 5-pointer. Almost, well over 600 earthquakes here, 622 to be exact. We got that location right there. We're still watching. Obviously, a seismic increase event. Also over here across the Ridgecrest area, where we've been watching some movement as well. Got about 212 earthquakes here in the last 30 days in this area. 14 today. Further down south in Los Angeles, this is the area that's seen that 4.4 recently. I'm a little concerned about that because we haven't seen a whole lot of earthquake aftershock sequences here following that 4.4. Now, if we look at the total tally, only about 22. Now, this is a different type of thrust fault here compared to, it all depends here. There could be potentially a thrust fault up here as well. But this specific thrust fault, only 22 earthquakes following that 4.4 2 days ago. Now, someone mentioned to me here, well, what's going on with the GPS out there, right? If it's a thrust fault, we should notice the land uplifting. But here's the bad thing. Obviously, the GPS stations here can tell us which way the land is moving, whether it's rising or sinking, moving north, east, south, or west. But this area here, the thrust fault, called the Puente Hills thrust fault, is, let me show you guys here on the map real quick, an area just southwest here of downtown Los Angeles, but it extends here further to the north here around Pasadena. It's a chunk of land here that extends further beyond the downtown Los Angeles area. If I could draw a square right about here, that would be it. Let me see if I got a different image of it. I don't. But there's a couple floating around. But this is just a general view here of the thrust area of the Puente Hills thrust fault. And again, this extends further to the northeast here. That includes downtown and close to the Pasadena area. Now, I checked out a couple different readings out here, and that's fairly normal. I'm not seeing any elevated activity out there from that reading. But let's see, this GPS station right here, 2024, a little bit of vertical displacement, right? But this is very minimal. And the reason being is because it takes literally a couple thousand years of stress to build up in the Puente Hills thrust fault system. A couple thousand, because the slip rate is very minimal. I can't remember exactly what it was, but on average, earthquake intervals run about 2,750 years. So they've done a study here, and they've shown that there's been a major rupture here on the Puente Hills thrust fault, which is capable of producing a 7.5 earthquake directly underneath Los Angeles. Every 11,000 in the past 11,000 years, there's been 4 of them. So that averages roughly about 2,750. So I'm having a little bit issues here getting a noteworthy value on when the last one took place. Now, I've contacted Dr. Lucy Jones here numerous times, direct emailed her, directly asked for a media interview on her website there. She's got a couple different websites, and also on her Twitter and her Facebook account. So I'm waiting for a callback. I gave her a deadline for the end of this month here, where I want to do an interview with her and ask her specifically when the last rupture was. A lot of people want to know when that was, because that gives us a good indicator of when to expect the next one. And I'd like to know how they figured out that this occurs every 2,700 years. There's got to be a method, right? If they discovered the past historical method, then why don't they know when the last big one took place out here? That's very interesting. If you have a scenario of 4 different earthquakes there in the last 11,000 years, that should tell us when the last one was. But nobody has mentioned it. The news articles and whatnot, they haven't really brought it up. 2,700 years, say it was 400 years ago the last time this took place. So we shouldn't expect anything big on this fault system for a couple more thousands of years. But when was the last one? I know it's a blind thrust fault and recently discovered there after the Whittier earthquake back in the late 80s, but they have to have come up with when the last one was in order to get the historical of 4 earthquakes in the last 11,000 years, a full rupture, right? Think about that. So how come this news hasn't been brought up here? I'm kind of curious. So I emailed Dr. Lucy Jones directly. I gave her an ultimatum. I kind of want to interview her, and we'll do that here on this channel if she responds. Looking at the rest of the activity out here, here is vertical displacement here, 2024. A little bit of uptick here recently. Notice that line here indicating a thrust up here. So maybe something's going on here recently that is not being let out to the public, potentially. But these graphs here give us a good indicator of some uplift going on. Now, this is the 100 mm. Now, you have to really zoom in here. Of this, excuse me, if this was on a different scale, this would be much higher. But this is on a 100 mm time frame, and there's a little bit of uplift going on there, positioned within this station there, around the southwest of Pasadena. This station here is a little bit of up and down in terms of the vertical displacement. Let me see what else we got here. Some mountain ranges out here around Dodger Stadium. Not so much on that one. But again, the extremely slow slip rate is going to not show up as a big thrust activity here, because that GPS station's there. They only go to about 2002, so that's very minimal. But overall, in the past couple thousands of years, who's to say that this activity hasn't been going up and up and up and up and up since then, since the last big rupture? So that's a bad thing about these fault systems that have not seen any major earthquake activity. in thousands of years, right? Just this new this new equipment that we got can only monitor so far back. This one right here, vertical displacement. More recently, a couple dots there indicating some vertical displacement there, but also back in 2015 it looks like as well. But again, we can't rely on these graphs that just show 24 years of data. In a fault system, a thrust fault system, that it takes 2,750 years on average to accumulate enough strain here to produce a 7.5 earthquake here underneath this area. So that's why the question on when was the last one is so important, folks. Very important, and I can't get the answer here. That one back in 1987, the Whittier earthquake, was only a 5.9. That is not a full rupture of the Puente Hills thrust fault. So I will continue to do my best to get the answers out there that many folks are asking, including myself. Kind of want to know when the last big one was. But either way, according to Dr. Lucy Jones, expect larger, more frequent earthquake activity out here for the time being. And that's what we're seeing. There's a couple different regions out here. You can pretty much draw a line from Ridgecrest north of the Garlock Fault shear zone. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot less activity up north here. The strain has accompanied this whole area recently. Bakersfield southward into Los Angeles, and a couple new swarms here just west of the Salton Sea, which is just off the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault, right? Got to remember there's many different fault systems out here, thrust faults, and you can name them whatever you want. But, don't forget about the main plate boundary. That's where most of the strain and accumulation slip rate accumulates there over time. And the San Andreas Fault has a higher slip rate than the Puente Hills Fault, the thrust fault, which takes, again, 2,700 something years to build up strain. The San Andreas Fault, not so much. It should have happened by now. And this one, it's been over 300 years since the last full rupture here of the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. So there's many different faults out here that are well overdue. A couple ones stirring up here across the area of Bakersfield for now. Las Vegas here. Let's see here. We had an interesting event out here. It looks as though it's very interesting here. Last night, we seen a trail of earthquakes leading off in this area. Well, those have now all completely disappeared, with updates on the earthquake locations now centered around one location instead of a trail of earthquakes leading to Las Vegas. Like we seen last night, right? All these earthquakes were popping up in a trail roughly along 5 here, this Highway 95 leading towards Las Vegas. But now they're all updated and confined to this one area. It's a little odd, to say the least. Satellite-based imagery here shows that this earthquake activity is northwest of this Air Force base that sits down here. Nothing going on underneath that area, as far as I know, but big-time swarming in this area. Now that all the earthquakes have been updated, roughly between 3 to 7 kilometers below the surface. A couple ones fairly shallow, and some 4s and 2s and 3s out there. I think the largest one was a 4.4 earthquake. This earthquake here was felt throughout Las Vegas area, as shown here on the map. It's just a little odd. Nevada obviously famous for earthquakes. As far as historical large earthquake activity out here, we can take a look at that real quick, see what we got. Stand by here for a second while we search the earthquake catalog. We're going to go 4.5 and above, since, I always put the year 1000 because I just want to make sure I cover it. But we don't know exactly how many earthquakes struck back then. Only historically, they include some of them. But I'm curious here about Las Vegas area, and specifically right around this area here. Let's see what they got. Wow, 0? Really? 0 results. Did I do that right? 4.5? Start time. Okay, that's a little weird. Let's do 2.5 and above. All right, so obviously it doesn't look like there's been any major large-scale activity out here. Doesn't mean there hasn't been, though. Again, similar to the thrust fault in Los Angeles, it may take hundreds, thousands of years for strain to build up here across various areas of Nevada for bigger quakes. But goodness. So that 4.4 that we've seen is technically the largest earthquake here historically around the Las Vegas area, at least in this little range here that I've picked up. You see that from yesterday. Goodness. So, yeah, it's crazy, folks. We're definitely getting some earthquake activity on the uptick out here, and Southern California is included. We'll continue to watch that. Up north, Northern California, a handful of smaller quakes here on the Calaveras fault zone. That's, I could sit here all day and talk about many fault systems that are well overdue. The Hayward fault, the Calaveras fault, maybe the northern section here of the San Andreas fault, 1906. It's been a little while. So we looked at, over 100 years of strain being built up out here. We've been living in some very quiet times here as far as earthquake activity, but as many have said, and including Dr. Lucy Jones, we are headed into a more active period of uptick in earthquake activity out here. So I think I'm going to be busy for the foreseeable future. Up in Northern California, not a whole lot going on here. I do want to check tremor. Look at this earthquake way up here. Early this morning, 1.7. They just added that on. That wasn't there in the earthquake update this morning. That is earthquake at the just shy of the Cascadia megathrust area. And that one could be overdue as well. Let me check tremor here real quick. See what we have. Oh wow. 617 epicenters of tremor. A definite increase here from yesterday, mainly underneath the Washington area, but also here in Northern California and Southern Oregon. Seeing some adjustment going on there across the subduction zone of the Cascadia. So we got a lot going on out here across the West Coast, that's for sure. A lot of increasing activity. Further inland, aside from Nevada here, fairly quiet across the Intermountain West areas. Some swarming going. Well, a little earthquake activity here near the Atoka. Is that right? 2.6 and 2.7. I'm pretty certain that there's some oil fields out here. Let me double check here and see. Oh yeah, right. Look at this. Those are not beautiful campsites out there in the New Mexico desert. These are oil pumping operations. You can see the tanks there. Some wastewater ponds, and these earthquakes here striking very close here to a lot of these oil pumping operations out here. This area of Nevada is littered with them, and of course as you get deeper into Texas, it only intensifies where the earthquake activity is happening. Same for Oklahoma. Not a whole lot there across the eastern portion of the country. With all this activity going on in California, you think Hawaii would have something going on, right? Well, there's definitely a noticeable increase in earthquake activity, but when a certain region gets to a level of maximum pressurization, things kind of die off in terms of earthquake activity that we've seen here over the last week or so. But today, it looks like things are intensifying here across the upper East Rift Zone, stretching out southward here towards the Helena Slump, where we got a trail of earthquake activity happening across the southeastern edge here of the Hawaiian Island here, the Big Island. That's something to watch pretty closely. A couple swarms going on up here across this area, even some threes going on. So let's go over here to the latest update here from the USGS Volcano site, where we're seeing that earthquake activity trail down south. Let me zoom in here real quick, see what we got. From a seismograph station view, there's a couple of those three showing up here. In the last couple hours, that could be a sign of intensifying movement and earthquake activity, and ultimately leading to a maybe an eruption or a displacement of magma across the area. Because as I mentioned here, over the last week or so, it's been quiet, but we've seen an increase in earthquake activity across this area of Hawaii, the Big Island. Deformation data here across the summit area shows us something going on here. Notice that little sharp vertical displacement here. That's some type of further push-up of the magma system from below. And that's why we're seeing that elevated earthquake activity out here across the area. And it's getting active out here. We'll have to watch this pretty closely. It's going to do what it's going to do, and we can just monitor it and keep an eye on it. No sign of an imminent eruption out here, but things are on the move right now. That's for sure. A little bit of activity over here once again around that hazard zone where they're predicting or forecasting a mega quake out here across this subduction zone. This is a 4.5 earthquake here in the last hour, where they seen that bigger earthquake here a few days back, 7.1. This earthquake activity triggered a response here from the Japanese government to put out a dire earthquake warning here for a mega quake potential across this subduction zone, and just kind of keeping an eye on it, see what becomes of it, right? A little swarming going on here across the Java Trench. That activity looks like it halted earlier this morning. I was kind of covering that on the update. Looks like some 4s and 5s stirring up there, but and some smaller quakes as well, but that has come to an end as of this morning. A little bit of displacement going on further up the plate boundary with a 4.2. Let's see what else we got here. Some deeper activity returning to the Tonga Trench with the number 3 magnitude earthquake range happening surface-wise across the North Island, New Zealand area. Nothing major going on there, though, for now. A little bit of activity across the Mediterranean, as noted. And South America area, what do we got there? 4.2 coming into the Chile area right now, about 107 kilometers deep. So, obviously things are getting on the uptick out here for now. We're continuing to keep an eye on things for sure. Iceland, let's go up here and check out the Iceland area, see what's happening way up north, where it comes and goes. Tonight, not so much. In the last 12 hours, about 103 earthquakes. But we're going to include all these little microquakes down here across the Svartsengi area. And that does include the area around Grindavik as well. Blue Lagoon, the Svartsengi power plant. Got to watch this here, folks, because we are at a pressurized state. Well over 20 million cubic meters of magma has been accumulated underneath this area now since the last eruption. And this earthquake activity is a good sign here of things to come. It's just a question of where or we're going to see the eruptive activity take place. It could be anywhere. No one knows for certain, but we got to watch this earthquake activity because that will be the key into seeing where this is going to take place. All right, earlier this morning we did see a fairly large X flare, a long duration X flare, an X1.1 it looks like, from the Earth-facing sunspot here. Let me go back here. That's going to be 3784, which has a fairly dynamic, complex, very deep, magnetically complex core here. That did produce a CME, but looking at the models does not show that it's going to give any major solar storming here in the days ahead. But this still has the potential here to produce some further X flares that it's certainly looking at us, right? And it is complex. It's a very dynamic core, noticeable on the visible disk. If you got a solar telescope, solar camera, that will make that very easily visible there, center disk of the sun. All right, let's take a look here, see what we got. 25% chance for an X flare, M flare at 75, C flare around 99% chance or so. Nothing major in the forecast as far as the auroras go. We'll continue to keep an eye on that sunspot there that produced that X1.11. Let's see what else we got here. I know hurricane or a tropical storm Ernesto, creating a little bit of havoc over the Puerto Rico area earlier. It is now headed due northward here, and it's expected to miss the eastern portion of the states there, eventually making its way northward towards the Bermuda area. Slowly but surely. And that is expected to make it into a major hurricane status as it heads further into the Atlantic Ocean. Look at that major forecasted right here. There's Bermuda, where there is some hurricane watches up in effect right now. Puerto Rico, it did a little number here on Puerto Rico. Lost a lot of power outages out there, or lost some power. But that is expected to head northward and stay away from the states. Not a whole lot coming into the Gulf of Mexico. There's Ernesto out here spinning off towards the north and northeast. That will stay away from the land. And aside from that, I really don't see anything tropical out here in terms of formation in the foreseeable future. But September can be a fairly active month as well in terms of the tropical situation out here across the Gulf and the eastern portion of the country. But nothing up here on the map for now. All right, folks, so I will continue to keep you guys updated there on my, hopefully my response from Dr. Lucy Jones. I emailed her directly, messaged her on her website directly, also on her X account and Facebook account here on my Earthmaster site. I think she knows who I am. I'm sure she's watched my videos. And it's a question that many want to know. And it seems to be a little dodgy question. Nobody's answering it, or nobody's asking it. Nobody's answering it. I get that it's a blind thrust fault underneath the surface, but riddle me this. How did they figure out that this thrust fault system has a reoccurrence interval of a couple thousand years? They must have known, right? There has to be a way in knowing when the last one took place. But it's no one's answering. No one's asking the question. So that's a little concerning in itself. I want to know, many other folks want to know when the last big one took place out there, or at least an estimate. And I think I think someone knows, but they're holding back. So I will keep everyone updated on if Dr. Lucy Jones is willing to give me a little bit of her time. I know I'm sure she's getting flooded with quite a few folks out here wanting to know what's going on, right? But I only have one question, and that is when the last one took place out here. The 5.9 that struck back in 1987 was not a full rupture. That was just a minor hiccup that this earthquake thrust fault zone can produce. I'll keep you guys updated. Have a good night. Thursday morning is upon us. Well, pretty soon here. It's just about 11 p.m. California time, but we'll catch you guys back out here for the Thursday morning update. Stay safe, folks. We got the member drawing being held tomorrow. We're giving away prizes, cash prizes, cold hard cash. So make sure you guys get in on the drawing. Become a member right now.